Welcome to another South Beach session. I am so happy to be joined by a legendary friend. He will poo-poo the idea of legend. He will poo-poo with great humility the job that he does on the longest-running funny show, just in sports, but for all of television. One could make an argument that you have the space.
Poo-poo.
No, I'm gonna do this introduction correctly because I want people to understand. All those guys say you're the most important piece, and you say that's ridiculous. Obviously, that's asinine. They're the stars. You're just there to serve them, but you know how to be a host. And being a host requires a decency, a kindness, and an ego that you don't generally find in the television business because you have to be someone who brings the ball up and just passes again and again and again, does it quietly. And you built a monster. I don't know if it's by accident. I don't know how much inventory. I imagine you're very meticulous. There's just simply no way you can do the job as well as you do without caring deeply about the craft of broadcasting. But I don't think people understand how hard it is to be you, and I need you to explain it to them without being humble, because it's not as easy as you make it look to do 30 years of the greatest sports television show that there has ever been.
What?
Welcome, by the way.
Thank you,
I just don't want you to be a humble guy here. Like, what you do is hard, and you can talk about it gratefully before God without poo-pooing how hard it is to do what you do, because I know they make it look easy. It is not as easy as you make it look.
There's a lot of work, and I love the work. And I love the prep. And look, I appreciate everything you said about the show and about my role. And there's not a day that goes by that I am not as thankful as I could possibly be about sitting in that chair for that long. Since I was hired in 1989 by Turner Broadcasting, and had to sit out a 6-month no-compete clause because I had been working in local TV in Atlanta. So I just spun my wheels for 6 months, did a few stories, and then it was the next season, 90-91 season, they said, hey, Craig Sager is going to go on the road. He's going to be a sideline reporter, because Craig was in the chair. And so you're our NBA guy. And it was, I had no idea that I'd be sitting here in 2023 talking about this run in that role. That was never in the cards. And what's kept me there is being prepared. And that's the whole key to the longevity.
Often without needing your colleagues to be as prepared, because they're there for expertise. And I know how much Charles hates those March Madness weekends where they make him memorize all the names, because you're doing the preparation in a lot of ways, as is an unbelievable production team, so that Kenny and Charles and Shaq can be maximum themselves. The reason that I admire it, one of the many reasons I admire it so much, is because of how rare it is to be able to keep those spinning plates together and working together when this is the vanity business, Ernie. Like, Shaq's used to being a star. Charles is used to being the star of that show. Kenny is used to being a facilitator who understands your role better than most.
Mm-hmm. But and the thing, you know why it's work? Because nobody tries to make themselves the show. Because they've never tried to make the show about themselves. And I'm in the fortunate position of getting us from point A to point B to point C with 3 guys who have been in every conceivable situation in a basketball game. And so nobody at home cares if what I think about what might be being said in a huddle with 1.7 seconds to go. They want to hear from the guys who have been there. And so it's up to me to try to bring out the best in these 3 guys. And knowing your role is vital. You know, if you try to stray outside your lane and be something you aren't, then it doesn't work. And the fact that we don't rehearse, and the fact that we just let her rip, there you go.
They have such reverence for your decency, though. Those, I mean, I've heard Charles speak about you. He doesn't speak
I know.
about many the way that he speaks about you. Those guys would do almost anything for you and have.
I would do the same for them. We all would.
Well, that's pretty unusual in television, isn't it?
Yeah, you know TV, yes, but I think that's what comes with years of being together. And when you think about, Kenny and I have been together the longest because I used to do the show by myself, and then for a while, just here's Cheryl Miller for a while, here's Reggie Theus for a while, here's Dick Versace for a while, and then Kenny comes along and we have a pretty good thing going, and then Chuck. But we're the three of us for more than 20 years have been doing this together, which is unheard of in TV, where the next TV executive always has a better idea. Oh, no, these three guys will work. No, this two, and to take him out and add him. And then Shaq for the last dozen years. So when you have that kind of time together and you have that kind of a bond, then you just, I'm not sounding sappy here, we love each other. We really, truly. And, I grew up with two older sisters, and this is as close as I'll ever come to having brothers. And that's what they are to me.
Do you tell them?
Oh, all the time.
Do they tell you?
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? There was a moment, too, when Kobe passed. We did a show out in L.A. Right there in the middle of the floor. The game had been canceled, but we were just going to spend that time talking about Kobe. And I remember Shaq on that night saying on the air that I don't say this enough to you guys, but I love you, and we do. And I think one thing that whole moment in time taught all of us was that you don't know. You don't know how long you have. And it behooves us to make sure that everything's cool between us. Everything's cool, not just between the four of us on the show, but between everybody in your life. That if the unthinkable happens, do you want to leave that with, man, I wish I had said this. Man, I wish that silly feud, I could have stepped up and defused it. I wish I would have said this. And I think that was it was a pretty brutal reminder of that.
How important is love to any sensitive thing that happens because people are talking for 6 hours on television a night and sparks are going to be caused and disagreements happen between siblings, friends, and loved ones? There's not a bigger ingredient to why it is that it's successful than that, right?
Mm-hmm. Without question, yeah. And that cuts right through the essence of what we do. And I mean, let's not get carried away with points in the paint and second chance points and fast break points and who's making this decision and why is this important. Keep it where it is. Sports is a great distraction from the real stuff because there's enough real stuff going on that'll drive you crazy. And so I think it's really important that while this is my job, and being in that chair has been at the center of my professional life, let's not forget what really matters. And because we're so familiar with each other, and because there are times where tempers, I wouldn't even call it tempers, it's just where opinions differ and defenses are raised, we're talking sports,
Oh, but I've found Shaq unusually sensitive. Not Charles.
He is.
But I've found Shaq to be, I don't know Kenny this way, but I feel like Charles isn't terribly sensitive. Almost anything rolls off of Charles.
You'd be surprised.
How so?
Because I think there are things that strike him, that strike a chord with him, that he feels very strongly about. You don't hear much about it, but I mean, he has causes like HBCUs are really important to him, the donations he makes there. How the average person in the world is getting by matters to him and matters deeply to him. And he is hurt when he sees things happen. So, yeah, there's a sensitive side to Chuck. There's a very sensitive side to Shaq. I mean, there have been times where we have felt that with him. And
the viewer, too.
Yeah, and we may laugh on the air about it, but he may take it home with him.
That's what I say when I say he isn't sensitive, I meant sort of to criticism. I've seen Charles with whatever would be described as the little people. Charles is extraordinary about giving of himself, unlike anyone I've ever seen in fame, making every person who comes into contact with him make sure that they walk away from, okay, that was, as long as I don't disrespect him, he won't throw me through a plate glass window. But if I'm just human with him, he will be just as human back to me in a way that's moving to me every time I see it.
Yeah. This is true. And with Shaquille, look, we had a huge laugh and people have seen the clip. Hey, it's supposed to go 1 to 2 to 3, not 1 to 2 and back to 1, and because Charles had taken up all this airtime on a sponsored element that we're weighing in on. And we all laughed, and we kept laughing with Shaq because it just sounded so funny. But he was bothered by it and came in the next day and carried it with him. It was like it hadn't been forgotten. It was like in the middle of these playoff runs where it's not like it happened on a Thursday, now we'll work again next Thursday. It was the next night. And he was still kind of in a shell. And so we realized, that, yeah, he is sensitive to this. And I'll be honest, I had an episode with him last year when he was late for a show. And there had been traffic, and we're living in Atlanta, and there's always a lot of traffic. But he showed up late for the show. And he came up with an excuse on the air about it was this or this, and we went to commercial break, and he said, "How'd you like that excuse?" And it had been kind of one of those days for me too, And I said, "I didn't like it." "What are you talking about?" I said, "I didn't like it." I said, "You need to be here." He said, "What am I supposed to do about 18-wheeler turning over and blah blah blah?" I said, "You need to be here." I said, "You're vital to this show." All right. Next day, dead silence. And really the rest of that night, that's where it happened. The rest of those shows that night, he was kind of just sitting in the chair, not volunteering much, waiting to be called on, which is not the way our show works. So I knew this was me. I had kind of crossed that line with him. And he respects me, and I respect him. I mean, I did a story with him back at his house in San Antonio before he was in the NBA. And he always brings that up. "Man, you came to my house." And he always says it's 1989, but it was like 91. Okay, so I knew that it bothered him that I had gotten on him. But he is not to, and this is not to mother bleep Shaq, but he is not to disrespect this thing that you care about, that you guys have worked hard to build. And again, people don't have any earthly idea how much work you do. Like you're not showing up late. And look, and it may have been very well a legitimate, hey, I left, and he told me I left 2.5 hours before, and I said, fine. I said, got to be here. So the next day, I'm sitting on the set. It's like 15 minutes before we go on the air. Normally, these guys come in and sit down at 3 minutes of, and the show open rolls, and bang, here we do the show. And he came out about 10 minutes early and came in very quietly. And here's the deal. The whole crew knew there was some tension because they had heard me say that in the commercial break. So he walks in 10 minutes early the next night, and he's quiet, and he's about 10 steps away from the set, and I got up, And I went over to him and wrapped my arms around him and jumped up and down with him like that. Hey, Shaq, hey. And finally he laughed. And then the rest of the crew was like, yeah, like, we're back. Everything's good. And I explained to him again then. I said, hey, that's out of love, man. And that's out of our need to always be there. And it's just one of those things you learn about somebody after hanging out with them that long.
You might not know this, okay, but your father is basically the person or one of the people who helped introduce me to sports, his voice, because I'm in South Florida. We don't have any sports, and cable television is a phenomenon in a crappy America's team. I don't like just the Atlanta Braves. They were all terrible. All of those teams were terrible.
I know.
But I loved as a kid. Like, look at Gary Matthews. He goes after a fly ball, and his hat flies off because he's got a giant afro. Yeah. And I'm like learning about terrible Braves baseball because it's the only thing on television. And I'm learning about broadcasting, or the person who's teaching me, like, who's got personality and flair. That's the house that you grew up in. Did you even have a choice on what it is that you were going to do?
Oh, sure.
No, I don't mean a choice like, did you have the freedom? I mean, once you see what your dad got to do for a living, you are like, I'm going to be something like that. No?
It wasn't uppermost on my mind. Now, looking at his career, his playing career, that was the goal. You know, growing up with a dad who played Major League Baseball, that was the goal. All I thought about was baseball, all growing up. And so, when I get to the University of Georgia, that's my goal. I want to play baseball. And I walk on, and somehow I make the baseball team as a walk-on freshman. And that was one glorious season, Dan, of being a backup first baseman for the Georgia Bulldogs. Didn't get to play much, went 2 for 18 at the plate with one career RBI, which came at Knoxville against the University of Tennessee.
You remember all the details,
in Game 2 of a doubleheader. If we sweep the doubleheader, we win the division, okay? If we sweep the doubleheader, we win the division. Jim Watley, the coach, in his last year there, he coached at Georgia for about 600 years. This was his swan song. And so he puts me in Game 2. And here goes the guy who's 1 for 17, who lines a single to left center field with a runner at second and knocks in the go-ahead run. And I am standing on first base, picturing my name in the red and black student newspaper the next day. You know, I say, Johnson delivers game-winning hit. Johnson delivers division title until somebody on Tennessee hit a grand slam in the bottom half of the next inning and we lost. But we eventually would go on to win the division. But that was so that was the goal. That was the dream, was to play baseball. So I walk on as a freshman and was told to walk off as a sophomore. My second year, I didn't even make it out of fall practice. A new coach took over. Bang, I was gone.
And the dream dies right there, or?
The Major League Baseball dream dies. Yeah, I mean, and you know what, in all honesty, I mean, I knew what my talents were. I kind of think, I probably don't have what a big leaguer is made of, because any pitch over 83 miles an hour had me bamboozled, and if you threw a wrinkle in it, hello. I don't know what mistake that kid from Tennessee made to lay one over the pipe, right down the pipe that I hit into left center field. I was late on it. But
I had a similar experience, and mine was 8th grade, though. It wasn't his college. It was just a kid who would go on to become a University of Miami pitcher. I'm sitting 0-2. I'm like, he's going to throw a breaking ball in the dirt or something. And he's like, no, I'm going to throw a fastball right over the plate because you're clueless. You don't know anything. And I'm like, I was trying to outthink you. Okay, never mind. I need to put my bat down and not play this anymore. Yeah. I need to write about it. I need to do something else.
Yeah. So there I am at Georgia, and I get cut. My dad took it harder than I did. He was hurt for me because he knew how much it meant to me. But I was more realistic than he was, and I was like, Dad, don't worry about it. And, it's okay. I don't think I was never going to be at that level. And so then it was, okay, what do you do? And I told myself, because I was an English major at the time, I said, I'm going to be an English teacher and a high school baseball coach. That's what I want to do. Because I had my baseball coach in high school, Jerry Queen, was a teacher and who got to go to the baseball field every day. And I said, that would be a blast. So that's what I'm going to do. And it was actually Skip Carey was the guy, working with my dad, who was like, because my dad never was like, okay, now do this, now sit here. And my dad wanted me to do whatever was going to make my heart pump a little more and get me going. Skip had just kind of said, you got a pretty good voice. You might enjoy this. You might think about it. And so I did. I thought about, I wonder what this campus radio station at Georgia is all about, WUOG. And I went in there, and they can't really turn you down. It was like, sure, okay, you're in sports, and do this. And no experience whatsoever. And they give me this assignment to do what's called hockey corner because the Atlanta Flames were, on the ice in Atlanta, and people were learning the game. And it was probably the worst thing that's ever been broadcast on any kind of radio station, anywhere. And I still have a cassette recording of it.
Do you really?
Yeah.
You're saying it's the worst and least interesting broadcast in the history of recorded sound, voice, and video.
Yes. Without question.
You were an incompetent, a fool. You have it now. You don't listen to it. Why do you still have this?
The game is played on a rink. 97. The puck is a rubberized disc. It was horrible, and that was what it was. And there were like three parts of it, and the third part was worse than the first.
3-part documentary on what is hockey.
What is hockey? Yes, WUOG Hockey Corner. And why did I still have it? Because I have a hard time throwing things away from the past because I never know where it's going to, come up. And I'm glad I held on to it because when they did the doc about Inside the NBA, 30 years of Inside the NBA, I was able to give that to the producers and say, do with this what you want.
look at what got fertilized here. You had nothing to work with, and this grew into. Now, you won't say this, right? You won't say that this is the best thing that's ever existed in studio sports television. I mean, the awards say it.
It's been pretty good. Yeah. And I won't put it over anything. I appreciate what we've been able to do. And the real, I leave that up to the folks who are watching, and it's gratifying to have people say that and to describe it that way. As, hey, this is the best studio sports show of all time or whatever. That's great to hear. But now is the next show going to be just that good? If somebody reads that and says, well, this Inside the NBA, I've never seen it, but they say here it's the greatest sports show of all time. I'm going to tune in tonight. It better be good. And it better not be oh, man, we phoned this one in today, or this wasn't good, or I asked stupid questions. It has to, you got to get better.
Caring like that, though, I do believe is unusual. Adults get formed, they get on with the balance in their life, and they don't necessarily hold themselves to that kind of hungry standard once they've already arrived at the mountaintop of where success resides.
There are too many good shows out there. I mean, there are good shows, and don't stop me before I say this. Okay, you're gonna want to jump in and say, a lot of guys could do what I do, and they do on a nightly basis. There are a bunch of guys out there who are great studio hosts.
Oh, wait, this is where I disagree with you, though. And I'm going to stop you. It's not even the mechanics of studio preparation.
I knew you were going to cut me off.
Well, because you're a fundamentally decent person, and it's really important in that role. You don't understand. Shaq could have screwed that all up with his sensitivities coming in. Anybody being too sensitive there who's not feeling cared about can disrupt the chemistry of that. If they're not feeling loved, if they're not being taught how to be maximum prepared. No, man, you're an unusual cat in this business. Like, that's What you're saying is not true. The mechanics of television, maybe, because that's harder than you think. Yeah, Bob Costas might be able to do the mechanics of television, but to make your teammates feel loved, nah, not everyone can
Just
do
loving
that.
them back.
But not everyone can create that environment. That's just simply untrue. You're underestimating what your gift is, what your aura is. Ernie, it's super unusual in this business to have your likability factor. 30 years on television? Nah, like maybe Pat Sajak or like game show host. No, honestly, but no. There has to be a fundamental, and this part I know is important to you. There has to be almost fundamental spiritual decency and depth residing deep in you that has lived some things and has learned the perspective of what's important and
Sure.
what is not.
Sure. It's the job is what I do. It's not who I am. And the job has been very good to me and my family and has paid the bills for a long, long time. Much more than I deserve. And but it's my job. And there was a time in my life where the job was right here. And now it's moved into its proper place, because I think sometimes we get so driven and get so ambitious that it overtakes everything. And so it took me a while to learn that and to realize that you can be good at your job without being consumed by it.
Do you remember when and where and how you learned it?
I remember a specific incident that kind of told me, what are you doing? This was back in local TV, WSB in Atlanta. And I'm the weekend sports anchor. And they give me about 6.5 minutes, okay, out of that half hour. And on a weekend, you got a lot of stuff going on. You got Georgia football, Georgia Tech football. You got, there's more than enough to fill up 6.5 minutes. And I sat down to do my segment, and the producer notified me that she had mistimed the show. So you got 3 instead of 6.5. I said, okay, so I didn't really go off at that point, but I kind of crammed this stuff in and got off the air, and in front of the production crew, as she is apologizing to me, I got in her face. She's against the wall of the control room, and I am just letting her have it. And it was absolutely, it was off the charts vile. And I walked away proud of it. And it bugged me for years. And it bugged me because I'd never apologized for it. And several years later, lo and behold, that producer had moved on from WSB, was now at CNN. And I reached out to her with an email first and then later face-to-face. And I said, I don't know if you remember me. And she said, I remember you. And I said, look, this is years late, but I'm sorry. And I said, you don't know how sorry I am. I can't even express it. And I'm just asking you to forgive me. And she said, I forgave you the minute you did it, because that's what my faith tells me to do. And I was like rocked. And it was really, that was kind of the defining moment that said, get over yourself, get over your job, get over your ego, and realize where this fits into the big picture. And it's not at the mountaintop. There's a place for it, but that's not where it is.
What happened between the obvious shame? What you were proud of it, and then you came to be ashamed of it and regret it. How much space is in there? Because you're, I imagine, a preparationaholic. Someone tells you that you've prepared for 6.5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You're given 3 minutes. Someone has made you look bad, has interfered with your preparation.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
But
how dare you do that to me?
But that's where you could have become infected by television's vanities with a lack of self-awareness. That's where it could have happened.
Yeah, but I was already infected with it because that was my reaction. I was already infected in it because you saw my reaction to her. Like, how dare you? And that's just so, and part of the reason it hurt so bad, because it was everything my dad wasn't. Because I learned everything from him. Everything about how to be a professional, how to prepare, all the preparation, that's from watching my dad. That's from going to the ballpark and watching him 6 hours before first pitch, doing his interviews, sitting down with his scorebook, doing his notes. I learned all that there. And so when I considered what I had done to this producer, I was like, my dad never would have done that. And I, thankfully was able to rectify that and seek her forgiveness, and how did I know she had forgiven me that moment it happened?
Why does it hurt you still the way that it does?
Because that's not me. Maybe, it hurts to, I think maybe because people think, oh, Ernie's never said a bad thing to anybody in his life. Yeah, I have. And I've been a total prick sometimes. And it takes it takes being intentional about doing the right thing and being, doing the right thing, being the right person. And not getting carried away with adulation. Because once you start getting on that train, where every good thing's said about you, you're kind of like, oh, here I'm coming. I'm getting that puffed up chest again. Oh, don't mess with my show because I might go off again. No, I can't do that. That's why you just have to take all of that with, hey, it's very nice. I appreciate the fact that you like the show. I appreciate the fact you like me. And I'm not going to get carried away with that. And I'm not going to get carried away with the folks who say, man, you're an idiot. I hate you on baseball. You're this, And so I think I've had to learn over the years just to take all of that in and not put too much emphasis on it.
Roughly what age were you when you arrived at the combination of things that would resemble both gratitude and balance so that you could take your job, not, treat it professionally and seriously, but not have it be a competitive thing where you had to be better than person X or had to get some better job when I'm guessing you feel like you have the best job in show business,
Sure.
The way that you carry yourself with gratitude.
Yeah, I mean, and you got into you mentioned the spiritual part of this equation, and that was huge for me, because, I'm not going to turn this into Sunrise Sermonette, but I was, I'm a good Catholic boy growing up. You're going to Mother Good Counsel School. You're going to St. Jude's in Atlanta. You're an altar boy and all this. And then when I went to Georgia, it was like, Sunday mornings for sleeping off Saturday night. And so I didn't pay God an ounce of attention for a long period of time there. And it was really, in the course of how your life turns out, you get married, you have kids, and you adopt, and you feel like there's something there that you haven't really been recognizing. That there's something spiritual about this. There is, that was kind of an awakening for me in like 1997. It was just went back to church for the first time in ages. Met a pastor who was kind of like me, had kids, had a wife about my wife's age and just seemed to have a peace about him.
What was the impetus for going back to church?
It was to give the kids a little grounding. It was like Eric and Maggie, who are our two oldest, would come back from playing with their friends and were like, how come we don't go to church on Sunday? And it was like, Cheryl and I said, we need to give them some foundation here. So we found this non-denominational church.
Oh, so it wasn't even about actually being religious. It was just sort of, let's get some structure and how to raise a family.
Yeah, let's give them some, so that they're not confused when one of the kids brings up Moses or Noah or somebody. Who are you talking about? So let's give them a little foundation. And within 2 Sundays of going there, I was being pierced as I sat and listened to this pastor, Kevin Myers. And he's talking about what's more important in your life, happiness or wholeness? Who's the provider in your family? I'm the provider and all about happiness. And he's like, well, you miss both of those. And the more I dove into that and explored it and opened up this Bible that I'd never opened up.
When you say pierced as a verb, it's because it's changing your thinking, or you're being stabbed.
Like I'm being stabbed, like he's talking directly to me, and it's just piercing my heart. And I'm saying I'm missing out on a lot of stuff, and I'm missing out on it because I think I've put this.
Because your values are wrong.
Yeah, I've put this job up here. I've elevated it to this, and the only church, the only altar I was worshiping at was Rudy Martzke.
The media critic
for the USA Today.
What a terrible God!
You know what? That was what was driving me at that point. I know what was driving me there.
No, you deserve to be pierced for that.
Yeah, was man. I can't wait for the Monday morning's USA Today to see if I made Rudy's column in a good way.
Your priorities would be wrong if
That's what was driving me.
That's funny.
It was what do people think about the job I'm doing, and especially not just viewers, but Rudy.
But also not thinking to yourself, what do people think about the job I'm doing in raising kids with a wife, where my focus is maybe my kids and my wife, but it seems to be me and my career.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and again, and even today, I mean, that's the question I get most. I talk to a lot of businessmen, a lot of companies. And always the first question is, how do you balance this work, this work and home thing? And it's not an easy answer. It's not. All I can tell them is you have to be intentional. You have to look at what your schedule is telling you should do, and saying, but is there time in here where I can do this for my wife, where I can do this for my kids, where instead of what it used to be was, no, that's a work day. No, can't do it. No, is that for real? Could you not work something in here? Because I tell those same folks, I say that kids have superpowers. They see and hear everything, and they remember everything. They remember when you paid attention. They remembered when you weren't there, when you could have been there. And they're accepting, I know, that, and I was too, of my dad. And I know that work took him on the road a lot, and he missed a lot of stuff.
I read something just the other day, actually, that the only ones who will remember 20 years from now that you worked late are your kids.
Mm-hmm.
Like that sentence resonated with a whole lot of people because of the relationship that they have with work. You have 6 kids, and you've been successfully married for 41 years, correct?
If we make it to August, it'll be 41. Yeah.
Many of them happy.
And
many of them happy years.
Cheryl Ann and I always say that too. We always tell people. But I also tell folks, I said, look, if you really want to score points with your wife, next time you're in a social setting and somebody, another couple's with you, well, how long have you guys been married? You're playing the role of my wife right now. And they say, well, how long have you been married? You say, not long enough.
That's pretty good.
It's not bad. That's good for 36 holes.
But I imagine you'd have to be a romantic. Would you give people secrets on what it is that, what is the key to loving someone for 4 decades? And
she says that I make her laugh. and I think the key is just pulling on the rope the same way, and having the same goal. And I'm a sportscaster. My wife's a world changer, and I've told people that forever because she's the one who got us into adoption in the first place. She's the one who has devoted her life at various phases to helping the addicted, the sex trafficked, and now the homeless. And she's always drawn to that. And I've always admired her for that, looking outward and rather than inward. And how can I help? And so that's been, look, I outkicked my coverage big time.
Well, if all you're providing is laughter and she's changing the world and she's
my point exactly.
I mean, you're fairly useless comparatively.
And the thing is, I make her laugh, and most of that's unintentional. So that's
well, my wife. There's nothing that makes my wife happier, and it delights me as well than when I'm a fool, which I often am. There is nothing that makes her laugh.
Oh,
more.
it's a guaranteed for me. I can do that just by saying, "Hey, I'll fix that," because me trying to repair something around the house is always fodder for the next 6 months.
Oh, but you try at least. I can't. My father did not hand me down that one. My father taught me how to work. I was not. The thing my father did teach me is have friends who know how to fix things.
Yes,
he did. I did learn that from my dad.
Cheryl's dad is awesome. My father-in-law can fix anything and can build anything. I've returned a hammer to Home Depot because it didn't have instructions. I mean, I'm clueless.
You should. It's laughable.
And I got that from my dad too, because my mom, my late mother, said, "Your dad's the only man in America who's never been in a Home Depot."
Yeah, well, but that's what he taught you, right? Like he ended up teaching you.
Yeah.
You don't know. I don't know how many of our patterns from our parents we pick up, but that one to me was largely blind for a long time. Mm-hmm. The idea that I'm slowly becoming my father in ways that are deeply uncomfortable to see in a mirror.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's not really uncomfortable. Sometimes it's kind of cool. Like in the hallways the other day, there's a guy who'd been at Turner for a long time who used to, work on some of the Braves broadcasts when my dad was still calling games. And I saw him the other day, and I said, "How you doing, kid?" And he just stopped and he said, "Man, you sounded just like your dad when you said that. He used to call me kid all the time." And I was like, "Thank you. I like that. Thanks for the reminder."
You sounds like the foundation is that you make her laugh, and you are awed and flabbergasted with respect for how large her love can be. Because I don't know how you ended up on the adoption path. But that is a substantive undertaking to choose. I am going to love someone up here, to create a home for someone so that they can have a safe environment and have a terrain that is successful, or that is more helpful to happiness than might otherwise be if not in a loving household.
No, without question. I mean, and that's, when I wrote Unscripted 6 years ago, and kind of a term that described the show that we do, but also the way we've lived our lives. And when you get married and you have a boy and a girl, and you've got what everybody seems like you guys have got it. You got a beautiful wife, you got a great job, you got a boy and a girl. Bang, set sail. And then she, Cheryl Ann sees 2020 one night and sees all these Romanian orphans, and then comes to me and says, what I think we need to do is we need to go to Romania and get one of these kids. And I'm like, no, really, are you serious? Yeah, this would be great. We need to investigate this. And we do. We investigate it. She goes over with a group. I stay home with Eric and Maggie. She's more worried about them hanging with me with no vegetables in the house for 2 months than I am about her being in Romania, where back in 91, who knows what's going on. It's not like everybody's got a cell phone, and then you're hearing about how the rules are changing all the time. And that experience changed the trajectory of our whole family. You know, that was for her to see this little boy who can't walk or talk. He's 3 years old and just makes sounds and has been in a crib since he was found in a park. Doesn't know how to chew because all they've been feeding him is out of a bottle, and he's 3 years old. And, you know, it's, you know, she calls me. We talk, and she's in Bucharest, and she tells me all about this kid.
This is Michael.
This is Michael. And she's like, I met this kid today, and he's so much more than we can handle. And she kind of lists what's going on. And she said, but I just don't know if I can live the rest of my life wondering what happened to him. So what do you do, Dan? So what do you say?
I follow my wife to the end of the earth.
Yeah, I said, bring him home. And even then, when the words came out of my mouth, it was like, what did I just say? But I had heard something in that. I had heard something in what she said. It was like, this is what we got to do.
So how does that work, though, when it arrives on your doorstep? I don't know how impetuous she is or you are because she saw something on television. We don't need to talk about this. We don't need to, like, really understand the decision we're making. No, follow your heart. Follow.
Oh, no, we went to a big meeting. So how does this whole process work, and what are we looking at? And so, you know, you have to go through this whole home study, everything to see if you're a fit parent. You know, if you do adopt a child, you know, what kind of a household is he or she going to be getting into? So we go through all that red tape and all that stuff, and then she goes, and so it wasn't like, wow, the 2020 just ended. That was really a touching story. I'm getting on a plane. It was, no, let's look at this. But the instantaneous thing was when I heard that in her voice, it was like, okay, here we go.
And can you explain to the audience what kind of undertaking? I'm not talking about paperwork here. I'm talking about the commitment to raise a child under these conditions.
Yeah, it was, one of his feet was totally turned in at the ankle, so he couldn't walk. And we knew when we got him home, he would have to go through a battery of tests from doctors here in the States to see exactly what the situation is, why, you know. And so, like, we would be awakened in the morning with and walk into his room, and he's on all fours, and he's banging his head against the crib. It's all self-stimulation for the first 3 years of his life. Nobody is paying any attention to the kid. So that's one thing that we see right away. And then they run a bunch of tests, and they fix his foot, and he's able to walk. And then he's walking with a funny gait, and they say, well, we need to do another test, and they cut open his leg, and they do a muscle biopsy, and they say he's got muscular dystrophy. And then you do research on MD, and you talk to doctors, and they say there's no cure for it. So we go from Ernie and Cheryl, Eric and Maggie, great job, boy and girl, here we go. You went unscripted, and now you've got a kid with a fatal disease who's 3 years old. And you just go from one day to the next. He's your son. And that's what you do. And you say, we don't know how long we've got with him. A lot of kids don't make it out of their teens. But in the meantime, we need to get him in speech therapy and physical therapy. And so maybe we can, he's 3 years old and can't talk. He's just making noise. He finally spoke when he was 8. And we're in the van one day, and all of a sudden out of the back seat comes Mike. Mike. He just said his name. And it's like, we're making progress. There's a step. And he would never be able to communicate like this. He had his, but you spend enough time with him through the years, then you knew the points he was trying to get across, and he had autistic tendencies and loved cars, loved lawnmowers. If he met you, he asked what you drive. And then he'd remember that. I mean, I'd run into teachers of his at the mall 10 years after they taught him. And I'd say, "Oh, Michael, who is this coming by?" And she'd be waving, "Oh, Michael." And he'd say, "Chevy Astro van, light blue." And she said, "Yeah, that is what I drove when I taught you." It was like this amazing icebreaker he had with people who were just drawn to his spirit. And I got to watch that. I got to watch that every day. So I never wanted anybody to think, "Oh, poor Ernie and Cheryl, look what they're..." It was like, no, see, you don't get what we get. We get to watch this every day. We get to watch him develop. We get to watch him grow. We get to watch him impact people, because we're not all here to play by the same rules. And so he was a joy and a wonder to behold, and his impact on folks much greater than I'll ever have on anybody.
What did he teach you?
Unconditional love of the being content with whatever you have. It's, Dan, a big day for Michael would be go to a car dealership, go inside and get a few brochures. And he couldn't read or write, but he could memorize all the cars. And he would see them on the road, and that's this, and that's a Toyota, and that's this. And then if you take it home and like laminate some of the pictures and put them in a binder for him, it's like he hit the lottery. It was an amazing thing. So it was, be content. Don't always, the next thing doesn't have to be bigger and shinier and brighter. It can just be content with the simple things. And his spirit was just, his favorite thing to say was, "Love you too." I mean, our family slogan is, and what we put emojis on stuff, and it's always this. It's always "I love you" in sign language. And that's the foundation. That's what our family's about. And he kind of paved the way for that.
You exuded. I mean, you have always seemed $5. You have always seemed maximum gratitude to me, just in the way that you carry yourself and talk about some of these things. But you exude it as well. It's unspoken. It's hard to explain to you. I don't know if you have this effect on people. There have not been many people in my career in the media who have this particular energy about them that is soft and kind and generous and grateful. And I don't know if you had it before, Michael. I don't know if you were the same kind of grateful when you had the perfect life as someone imagines it and then chose something harder.
Yeah, it was, I think I tried to be that person, but when Michael came along, he just brought us to a different place. He just brought us kind of into his world. And the best thing about it for me was, it put us into a servant mentality every day. You woke up in the morning, especially as he got older. And, he died at 33, which was much longer than anybody thought that he'd be around. But into his teens and 20s and 30s, and confined to a wheelchair, and the last 10 years of his life on a ventilator. You woke up in the morning knowing my job today is to serve this guy. And you had to do everything for them. And that's everything. And when you have that kind of a need and a desire to serve, that's good. Because I think I wish everybody wanted to serve. I wish everybody woke up in the morning saying, how can I help you today?
Oh, but you've stumbled upon a great secret to happiness. I don't know if you stumbled on it before, Michael, or not, but I mean, that the rewards of giving are so much larger than the rewards of taking. Like, I mean, if you're doing it consciously, right? I think a lot of people get caught up on the path to unhappiness with superficialities that aren't quite that.
Yeah. Well, this is from the guy whose week would be made if Rudy Martzke said I had a funny line, to, man, Michael, what am I going to do today with you? What are we going to make? How are we going to make you more comfortable? How are we going to shave you today? Is this a shave day? Is this, that kind of stuff? And it was, yeah, it reinforced where everything in my life and in all of our lives in our family, it kind of reinforced where everything should fall. Are you caring too much about this? Yeah, I mean, and I listened to the audio book, the Subtle Art of Not Giving a. You familiar with this?
Yes. No, there is.
Yeah.
I've read the book, and there is wisdom in there, although it's got barbed wire all around it.
Yeah, it does. But there are certain times when you read that, you know what? Yeah, that I could care. I should probably care less about that. And I think what Michael did, and what all of our kids have done, is kind of put us into a position of here's what's important to care about. Here's what's forget it.
Well, when was the last time anything involved with your very successful, popular show has resulted in Ernie being truly enraged?
Enraged?
Truly enraged.
I have a feeling that you have something that.
No, I don't have anything. I can't imagine it is what I have.
No,
it is something that I simply cannot imagine. Although you gave us a story from a long time ago, you don't carry yourself with someone with a temper.
You know what made it. I don't know if I would call it enraged, but back when I was doing our baseball coverage and doing play-by-play on of the playoffs. The Braves and Dodgers played one year. I can't remember the year. But there was this, like our PR department said, hey, would you do an interview with this L.A. writer? Yeah, sure. Whose first question was, hey, your dad broadcast Braves games forever and ever. Can you tell me that you're going to go into the series with no bias? I was like, look, I'm a professional. I said, I call the games. I want the games to be competitive. I'm not rooting for anybody, so please. But so there was these sides that had developed, and you see this on social media, at this point. It's like, well, before the series even starts, he's going to be pulling for the Braves because of his dad. And the Braves fans got their take. But as the series unfolds, and the Braves lose to the Dodgers in the opener, and I'm on my feed, and it's like, your dad would be ashamed of you. And there was some rage there from me. Because that hurt. I had Braves fans, the organization my dad had devoted his life to, saying, because they expect me to be waving pom-poms in the booth and go Braves. And that's not me. I'm a national broadcaster. I'm calling this. So then when the Braves come back and win the next game, then the Dodger fans are like, oh, man, so it's so obvious. So that stuff, I don't know if it enraged me, but it bothered me.
Well, but your dad, your dad wasn't as bothered. Was your dad someone who felt the need? I don't remember him feeling totally impartial. I felt like he was regionally a voice for a region that celebrated a team, but I'm looking at that through a child's eyes.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
Dad wanted Dad knew who was, that Ted Turner's name was on the check, so Dad knew he was the Braves broadcaster, but he was very fair. I never got that vibe from him. Like I got that vibe from a lot of announcers you hear these days on any sport who are pulling for their
But you were
team.
getting mad because a random person had dared to say that they somehow know that your father would be ashamed of you when all you've done all your professional life is make sure that that name remains pristine because of the respect you have for your father and his craft.
It hurt. And one of those things that taught me was I just can't get carried away with this. I just can't. I'm not going to answer everybody who
And there goes the great story. There's not real rage there. It's just a mild, this jerk said something mean on the internet.
Yeah,
and I'm going to be an adult about it. It's very disappointing.
But I know, but I tried.
Why don't you throw your phone at somebody?
I really don't get that mad about stuff. I don't know.
Well, but it sounds like you carry yourself with a perspective. Look, I mean, what you're talking about, Ernie, there is really hard. When you can make life distilled down to, is today a day we're shaving? Mm-hmm. Is today the day I can be of service? When you make your life that small, everything becomes a silly thing. Often everything work related,
and work becomes, work became an escape during that time. Work became like, okay, Cheryl, you got Michael now. I had him in the morning. You got him now. We have a nurse overnight. I'm going to work, and that was a place to kind of just do your thing, have fun, talk hoop, and laugh.
Is that when you remember the show being the best kind of distraction for you, or the work being a more positive distraction because you have a better relationship with balance and perspective?
Yeah, I think so, but and I'll tell you this, and it doesn't always work out that way, that it's this great, like this place to escape. Because when Michael died, I took a week off, and I went back to work thinking, oh yeah, this will be good to give this, have this night to do this. And all I did was wind up calling my wife during the night and saying, I wish I was home. I'm not ready to do this again. But I don't want to. But then you're thinking, your dad would probably be at work, and but I was so not into it for about a month. For about a month after I went back to work, I was so not into it, and I felt like I was cheating folks who were watching. Felt like I was cheating the guys I work with, because I wasn't dialed in, and all I could say, because I don't want to be at work just wishing I was not at work, and that was hard. And so I think if I had it to do over again, I would have said, look, I need a little more time, because it's just like there's no guide that comes when you adopt a child with special needs. There's no guide that says, here's how you do this. Just like there's no guide, and everybody knows this, when you lose somebody you love, there's no guide that says, here's how you deal with it. We all going to deal with it differently. And so there were just too many reminders during the day that had me, had my mind anywhere but at work.
What a difficult crossroads, though, to be sort of stuck emotionally between whatever, this is what my dad would have done, and I should be home with my wife because that's the important place to be right now.
Yeah. It was, and I think part of it was I was trying to prove to myself that maybe I'm tougher than I really am. Like, a week is fine. A week away from work will be fine. I'll be great. And I'm not that strong.
Well,
I'll be the first to admit it.
But work is also an excellent place to hide, usually from things less large than that.
Yeah, but it wasn't a good place for anything at that point, and I knew it. And but the guys were great. And I'm sitting at home, and they did this wonderful tribute to Michael on the pregame show, and I just felt so loved by the place that I've loved for ages, and so I work in a special place.
It's a special thing that you have. It's not just a special place. You are somebody who has contributed to making it that special. You've been an anchor in the middle of that place in spirit. And I'm done here hitting you with the syrupy stuff, but I do want the audience to know that you are a special human being, and the work that you do in this industry is unusual for a number of different reasons. And I'd put lower on the list the craftsmanship of it, the environment that you have created that is a celebration of sport and life, where people can talk about serious things, feeling like they are in a family loving environment. Give yourself some more credit for what that is. You can be grateful about it and understand that you had a part in making it the spiritual soul of sports that it is.
I am grateful, and I appreciate your words, because that means the world to me. It truly does. And it's like It's a Wonderful Life, man. It's my favorite movie of all time. You know, here's to my big brother George, the richest man in town. That's the way I feel every day. Thank you.
Thank you for your work, sir, and thank you for spending this time with us.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, man.